Good. So, here we are at this horrible part of the year again. Oh, there is a book that accompanies these three Shiurim. Here it is here, and this is only 50 shekels. I'm spoiling you. So this building tomorrow, Sinas, Chinam, how it starts, how it spreads, good morning, and how to get rid of it for good. So that would be quite good if we could do that. And that's what we're going to try and do in this year, okay? So there you go. So good, go ahead. She's the sorry. That was
Can I have change?
We can sort this out afterwards. Don't you? Just grab the book so nobody else can, and have a fight. And
the payment for the books will go directly to the Rav, and payment for the share goes
to the show. Right. So, where to start? Well, there is this very, as I say, you come to this time of the year every year, and you really think, oh no, we shouldn't really be here again. More than that, the very, very depressing Yerushalmi says, I'm sure we're all familiar with this, and probably everybody giving a share in the 3 weeks leading up to Tisha B'Av will quote this: if you live in a generation that doesn't see the temple rebuilt, you're behaving precisely and exactly as the generation who got it destroyed in the first place. So that's a cheery start, isn't it? More than that, just to really rub salt in the wounds, when Hashem is angry with Klal Yisrael, and of course everything comes from Hashem, I don't need to say that looking around here at this audience, then which section of Klal Yisrael is he angry with? Is it the non-frum, people doing pride marches for this, that and the other, or whatever, or is it the frum section of Klal Yisrael? The people like you? And the answer is, it's people like us. The people who know no better whatsoever, those who are known as Ami HaOretz, or even Tinek Shenishbo, people who have no background, maybe were brought up in a completely non-Jewish world, you can't really expect, Hashem doesn't really expect any more from them because they simply don't know. But for those of us who have the incredible blessing of being born into frum families, or having had the great fortune, if there is such a thing as great fortune, to see when Hashem has put them on the path to join these people so that we know we're the people who are ultimately responsible. And if you remember, Parshas Pinchas is this week, and just before that there is the incident of what happened at Baal Peor. And there, if you look carefully, it says that the Yisrael came to the people, the Am came to this particular place, and then it says that the Am started to get involved in Avodah Zarah. The Am started to bow down to the gods of the people, and Hashem's reaction is zero. But the next part says the Yisrael gets involved in Baal Peor, and Hashem is furious. So what's the difference? The Am are the ordinary people. But when the people who knew better started to make a mess of their relationship with Hashem, started to get involved in Avodah Zarah, Hashem is furious. Or Ramat Solomon once pointed out, quoting the Brisker Rav, if we didn't know the story of Yonah, which of course we all do, and we were just to had some sort of camera which took us back in time, and you don't know the story of Yonah, and you see a ship being miraculously thrown up and down in the sea, there's a storm which is only surrounding the ship. Everybody else is, out on these boards, these paddle boards, having a nice time, very calm sea, and this going up and down. All the non-Jews have got out their idols, praying to the idols, and there's this guy with a long beard and payas standing there, and he's shockling. And if I were to ask you, who do you think has caused Hashem's anger? The non-Jews doing Avodah Zarah, or the frum Jew davening? And you didn't know the story? Well, what would you think? Well, obviously the non-Jews, they're engaged in Avodah Zarah, which non-Jews are not allowed to do as much as we're not allowed to do. But of course, it's absolutely the opposite. It's the people who know better. It's the Yoina, the rabbi, the Novi, that's what Hashem is angry with. So here's an important rule. When things are going wrong in Klal Yisrael, the people who've triggered this, who've caused this, are people like us. Not the Amorites. They don't know any better. It's people like us. Okay. And if you live in a generation that doesn't see the temple rebuilt, then your generation is behaving exactly like the generation that God destroyed in the first place. I heard a story just recently, which I must admit really, well, I'm old enough, I suppose, that one shouldn't be shocked at such stories. But there was a lady, there's all this color-coded Judaism. Where are you in the spectrum? Are you black? I'm actually wearing a rather fetching navy blue suit today. But are you in the black spectrum? Furry hats, 2 buttons at the back. You can go through all the way to modern Orthodox or Dati Leumi, and all sorts of shades in between. I think this is a lady in her family who were probably modern Orthodox, if that's, I don't mean that in any way pejoratively. Anyway, so basically, a friend who knows this family very well told me that they moved from some place where they were staying to a new apartment which they bought in an area which was made up effectively as the same sort of people as them, as we all tend to do. So it's a modern Orthodox area, and so she's settling in there, neighbours are being nice, and she met a new neighbour who, of course, was asking her all sorts of questions, as Jews do. We're going to know if we're related, because we all are. Anyway, so basically, she asked her the following question. Do you have any children in the army? To which she replied, yes, I've got 2 sons who are serving in Gaza just now, and a son-in-law who is in Gaza as well. Oh, said the lady, delighted, you must hate Haredim. To which the lady replied, no, I don't. We protect the Jewish people in the way that we think is best, and they're protecting the Jewish people the way that they think is best. The lady's face fell in a grimace and horror, and that was that. She then went around telling everybody in the neighbourhood that this woman, who checked every single box, the same hashkafa, the same dress, kippah ruga, whatever it is that we wear to identify exactly where we belong. But she failed the critical test. She didn't hate. Now, if you think that that is exclusive to that section of our spectrum, sadly not. I remember as a young man staying here with my late wife, Alea Shalom, the first year of our marriage, we were staying in Sanhedria with an old chavra of mine called Avram Henry from Manchester, and looking out the window from his very tall apartment, I saw in the beautiful gold stones of Yerushalayim. You know why Yerushalayim is gold, don't you? And the stones. You're not allowed to make a building if it's not got the facade of the Jerusalem stone. Because of the Scots, madam. Because the military governor of Jerusalem, after they kicked the Turks out, was somebody called William MacLean. And he made a law that all Jerusalem buildings have to be covered in that beautiful stone. So that's why we have such a beautiful city. Wow. So just want you to know, Scots have a place in this as well. Anyway, what was I trying to tell you? I've gone off my subject. Oh, don't go off the subject, Rubenstein. You forget what you were talking about. What was I talking about, ladies? Aha! Yeah.
A woman who had no hate.
Sanhedria, you were saying.
Sanhedria, and I looked out the window, and on the beautiful goldstones, that's why I went off. There was somebody had spray printed in red paint a swastika. And I said to Avram, what is that? And what that was, it's some sort of Arab who's crept in, and swastikas are very, very popular in Gaza and Beis Lechem, incidentally. He said, no, it's a machlokas over the hechsher of the butcher shop.
Wow.
A swastika? A swastika? Or I have a nephew and niece, and when they moved to Yerushalayim, he's learning in Brisk and has been learning in Brisk for, I think, the last 4,000 years by the look of it. And they moved into a certain area which was Hasidish, and they're Briskas, and the phone calls, rats are going to eat you. In order to chase these non-identical Jews out of the area. So it's certainly Nothing that's exclusive to any particular section of our spectrum. The spectrum I'm talking about is people who should know better. Okay. Many years ago, I think about 10 years ago, as we all know, there is a wonderful gathering of ladies in Binyani Ha'umah during, I think it is, the 9 days. And they focus on the mitzvah of Shmiras HaLashon. And so about 10 years ago, I was invited, along with the new Rosh Yeshiva of Eshet Torah, Rabbi Breitovitz, and myself, to be one of the 3 speakers addressing this huge gathering of ladies. I think that the numbers who attend these talks in Ivrit is something like 10,000. It's huge. The English it's 5,000, which is the largest live audience I think I've ever spoken to. 5,000 is huge. And so when I stood up there to speak, I pointed out that the Chofetz Chaim, and you probably know this, at the beginning of Sefer Chofetz Chaim, he says that the destruction of the Second Temple was caused because of Lashon Hara. Lashon Hara. The Gemara says it was because of Sinas Chinam, but of course they're intertwined and totally symbiotic, really. And so I said to them something that I heard Rav Matisyahu say many years ago in a kollel in Manchester, England. And he addressed the audience and he said, for all the work that has been put in to Shmiras HaLashon, of course launched primarily by the Chofetz Chaim, but his initiative was going to die until along came the Manchester Rosh Yeshiva, Rav Siegel, the Tzadik Kodesh Livrocha. I was zocher to be close to both of them, who rejuvenated it. There was a little diary you could learn Shmiras HaLashon every day, and as it were, kept the momentum going. So Rav Matisyahu, the Mashgiach of Gateshead in those days, subsequently the Mashgiach of Lakewood, a rather orthodox gentleman, ladies, said you would have to admit, imagine this one going down, pause for dramatic effect. You'd have to admit, he said to the kollel in Manchester, for all the work that's gone into Shmiras HaLashon, the project's been a complete and abject failure. Right? And I suppose it's hardly controversial, because if the Chofetz Chaim says that it was Lashon Hara that caused the destruction of the temple, and if the Talmud Yerushalmi says that if you live in a generation that doesn't see rebuilt, you're behaving exactly like them, then of course it's been a failure. If it hadn't been a failure, there would be a big temple over there, and I suppose we'd be having the Shir somewhere else, near the temple. In the Ezra's Noshim, domain, give Shiurim in the Ezra's Noshim, I'm not sure. Anyway, but you get the idea. So he said, therefore, do you think it would be possible, maybe it's too much, maybe it's just too much for us. Do you think, obviously he was saying this with his tongue in his cheek, right? Do you think you could manage not speaking Lashon Hara just during the mornings? Right? Could you just not speak? Don't pick up the phone to your neighbour who's always got stuff to tell you. In the mornings? No. Could we do 1 hour a day? Said Rav Matisyahu. But of course he was addressing this exact fact. We haven't solved the problem. So when it was my turn to speak, I said something which I suppose was a chutzpah, but I'm still happy to defend it. I believe this is Y. Rubenstein. So you're perfectly willing to allow you to say this is total nonsense, and maybe it is. But I think our problem is that we have been dealing with the symptom of the problem, not the source of the problem. The symptom of the problem, not the source of the problem. Look, somebody's rushed into the emergency room. The first duty of the medical staff is to examine the patient to see what's wrong with him, what the symptoms are. So let's say the person's a raging fever, the thermometer's through the roof. The first thing you have to do is get that temperature down, that fever gone, because you die from a high fever. So sometimes they actually stick people in baths with cold water with ice just to achieve that. But once you've stabilized this temperature that's gone through the roof, then the next thing you have to do is find out what's the cause of it. So my supposition is that in actual fact, it is not Lashon Hara. Lashon Hara is a symptom of the problem. What is the actual problem itself? And that's what I think I'd like to explore today. What is the cause of the problem? Of course, because once you know the cause of the problem, then you have the opportunity to cure the problem. But if all you're doing is treating the symptoms of the problem every time that it reoccurs, it's because it's reoccurred. Because all you did was treat the symptom. We want to actually get to the cause, the root cause, and what the disease is all about. I think I mentioned to you before when I was first teaching at a Beis Yaakov school. Did I ever tell you this one? I'm disadvantaged in many, many ways. One of them is I have no siblings. I am an only child, or unique, as I prefer to think of myself. And consequently, when my first son came along, who lives here, I was quite challenged. How do you do being a dad? Now, you see, it's easier if you watch, your parents interacting with your siblings, but it's harder when there's only you, because nobody sees anything objectively about themselves. So how do you do that? But at least I had a male interaction with me, a male, to, as it were, base my parenting on. But when, after 4 boys, my first daughter arrived, and I didn't think we did girls. I remember the nurse handing me this little girl, tears pouring down my cheeks, and it was great. But how do you bring up girls? I had no sisters to see and to base this on. Anyway, that was okay. I think they both tell me I did not too bad a job. But when I was teaching after I left Cowlall, and I was teaching in Shiva, doing curriculum and campus stuff, and also I was teaching at the Beis Yaakov school, how do you teach girls? Now this is a mystery. And so you see, if, particularly coming from the era that I come from, if boys misbehave in class, then you simply look at them and go, "You!" in a sort of very strong Scottish accent. "You! Stop that!" And they get the message, right? Now, if you do that to a girl,
start to cry.
aha! Yes. They unleash their secret weapon and they cry at you, right? And of course, if you're anything like a mensch, all you do is go and fall to pieces, right? And apologize and grovel and so on and so forth. Anyway, so I'd studied education at university, and I was very, very taken by the work of a Swiss pedagogue called Piaget. And anybody who's suffered studying Piaget will know. But at the time, being young, I was very keen on this guy. Anyway, so basically, I'm teaching in the school, and I think it was quite successful. And then it came to the end of the year, and the end of the year, obviously, is accompanied by the end of the year exams. And the end of the year exams, after there, and the results are gathered, then there is the report card. Now, as you probably know, writing report cards is an art form. You've got the score that the girl achieved in her chumash, halacha, whatever it is, and then after that, comments. That's where the art form is most manifest. You see, a comment like, could have tried harder this year, did no work the entire year. Sometimes misbehaves in class, set fire to the classroom. But you can never say what actually happened. And so, but you see, I had studied Piaget, and I was absolutely convinced that being honest with parents was the right thing to do. Right? Now, the older and wiser teachers tried to curtail my plans, but I'd studied education, and therefore I wasn't listening to anybody. So if the girl consistently misbehaved, did no work. And then, of course, off goes the report cards. What comes after that?
Phone calls from parents.
Sorry?
Parent-teacher conferences.
Parent-teacher conference, as they say in America, or parent-teacher evening. And I remember it was in the gymnasium, and there was all little desks gathered all round the gymnasium. They had a little name tag, Rabbi Y.Y. Rubenstein. And the parents were all lining up to come in. And I must admit, I was, and this is pure gaiva, but I was really very, very pleased to see that almost every set of parents were waiting to speak to me. And I looked round pityingly at all my colleagues who nobody wanted to speak to. And then the first set of parents sat opposite me, and the father stretched across the table till his nose was separated from my nose by about 1 millimetre. And then he said, "So why do you hate my daughter so much then?" He looked as though he was going to punch me. He was going to punch me. And he wasn't the only one that night. And I remember coming home and saying to my late wife, I don't understand these parents. Are they idiots? Do they want me to lie about their daughters? This was, of course, before my own children started coming back with report cards. If anybody insinuated in even the remotest way that there was something wrong with any of my children, it was quite clear to me it was only because the teacher was mentally retarded. Or an anti-Semite. Or a mentally retarded anti-Semite. But there's nothing wrong with my daughter or my son. The point I'm trying to make is there is one category of person you'll never want to speak Lashon Hara about, or hear Lashon Hara spoken to you about, and that is your children. We just don't do that because we love them. And because we love them, we don't want to hear anything negative about them. We don't want to speak Lashon Hara, and we don't want to hear Lashon Hara. So I think that basically, yes, Lashon Hara is a symptom of the problem. And the fact that it was universal is an indication that there was a massive lack of affection and love for Klal Yisrael at that time. And so it was who you are, what you look like, what headwear you're wearing, etc., as opposed to it's just Jews. And call, as we'll get to next week, call Yisrael we really are family. There's a little bit of you in me and a little bit of me in you. Did you know you were part Scottish? And so we all, and if you feel that, if we really felt that, if we worked in that, then the truth is the temple would have been rebuilt. Because of course, if all you're doing is treating the symptoms, not treating the source of the problem. Just imagine the amount of work that's been gone in to Shmiras HaLashon and study sessions, Shmiras HaLashon, Shiurim. And I maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, is there an equal movement teaching Ahavas Yisrael? But if there was, no, there's one of our Shiurim that's next week is dealing with people. Somebody wrote a book called Learning to Deal with Difficult People, ... including yourself, right? And whenever I ask an audience which is more difficult, mitzvahs being odom l'mokam, the mitzvahs that demand a relationship between God and you, or mitzvahs between other human beings, I've never had anybody who said anything but other human beings are the big challenge. So really, if we get that one right, everything falls into place. Essentially, we can close Shmiras HaLashon. Nobody's going to want to speak Lashon. Nobody, if you're shipwrecked on a desert island and you could get some Sforim off the boat before it sinks, and there's you and your children, you can leave Shmiras HaLashon behind. You're never going to need it. You want to hear Lashon Hara about your children. One of my lifetime's ambitions was to meet Reb Shlomo Wolbe. And, I always tell my Talmidim or Talmidas, if there is a Shiva, and you hear somebody is sitting Shiva, go straight away. As soon as you hear that somebody's sitting Shiva, go straight away. Because what is absolutely guaranteed is your busy life will almost always pull you away from having gone to the Shiva, so that 10 days later, oh my goodness, I didn't go to the Shiva. So when you hear the Shiva, go straight away, check the box, you've been there, you've done the mitzvah, etc. Somebody wisely said to me, nobody will remember the reason that you couldn't come. When you explain to them, I'm sorry, because of this, that, and the other, they'll just remember you didn't come. Similarly, if you get a chance to go and hear a great Rov or Rebbetzin, a Tzaddik, a Tzedekah, because how long are they with us after all? Remember, a Tzaddik or a Tzedekah only really emerges on the radar of Klal Yisrael usually when they're 60s. And that's young. 70s and 80s. Well, in the scheme of things, then they're only going to be with us for 10, 20 years. So if you get a chance to go and hear them. Now, of course, I was living in America, and he was in Israel, but I should have got on a plane. Always wanted to hear what he has to say. In his Sefer, they've renamed it. This was called Das Shlomo. It used to be called Mamara Yimei HaRotzin. His Shiurim during the month of Elul. This is astonishing. Habriya Kulam Uchedes Umedbekes. The entirety of the creation was designed with absolute and total perfection. Ki lo av echad l'kolonu. Because after all, isn't there one architect, one father, one creator of the entirety of the planet that we live on? The Kol Nivra and everything that He created, Kruvim Zelazeh, there's an interconnectivity between everything that Hashem created in the world. It's all connected. As it were, it has the signature of the architect running through every aspect of it. Mishpacha Achas Gedoyle, one huge big family. Lana, as human beings, Bnei Adam, Kriva El Hadoimim, we have a certain commonality with that which is inanimate. Shari offer an achta, because that's where we came from, didn't we? Genesis chapter 1. Oh, it's actually chapter 3, isn't it? We were created from the earth. Right? So we have a connection to the inanimate, to the earth. Fine. Kriva El Tzemech, we are certainly connected to that which grows, because we grow. Our hair grows and our nails grow, etc. Because growth is part of us. And our connection with animals, with the animal kingdom, is more pronounced. And our commonality, as it were, with the animal kingdom is more pronounced. Somebody once pointed out to me, very often, this is a bit cruel, that people who own dogs, they resemble their dogs. Or the dogs resemble them. There was, when I used to live in Liverpool, when I was in Codal there was a fellow who had a boxer, you know, a boxer dog looks like a flat face. And he was a boxer, so he had a flat face. But there is a certain connection, more of a feeling of commonality and connection between us and animals. But that connection is far more apparent. And obviously our connection with other peoples, other human beings, even if they don't fit into our categories that we were mentioning before, even if they're not Jewish, but that creates a more of a commonality. They are, after all, made, and every human being is made in the image of Hashem. So says Rosh Hashanah, in the ancient world, that the hatred of the foreigner was huge. Remember, in Sodom, a foreigner who came into Sodom, that was already chayiv misa. Your life was gone if you stepped into, or was offered as an alien to come into to Sodom. In the ancient Greek world, think of the Chinam story, Greece was lots of tiny little city-states, Sparta and Athens and various others. And there were enemies. They all looked the same. They were all Greek. They all spoke the same language. But the fact you were a Spartan and you were an Athenian, that was enough to hate you and to cause war. Anybody came from far away, that's it, death penalty. And why was it that they had that attitude towards aliens and foreigners? Because they didn't recognize that we're all children of the same Father, Av Echad L'Kolana. Whereas Klal Yisrael, Yodea ki ein zorim, we know that ultimately there's no such thing as a zar, a foreigner, somebody who's totally different. When you come into Ben Gurion, you go down that big long passageway, and then you see the sign there, Israelim Zarim, right? So, and the Torah commands us to love the ger. Now the ger in this case is really talking about ger toshav. That's somebody who's not Jewish, who lives amongst Klal Yisrael but keeps the Sheva Mitzvahs b'nei Noach. Then you've got to love the ger. And the Torah says, why? Because you were gerim. How was it for you in Mitzrayim? Right? This is, you're denying the fact that Hashem is the architect, or rather the creator of them as well. Okay. Yoser mizeh. Mishkosis kol avoida am Yisrael emskarbas bein habriya leborov. Garcinin man machas nag ki bi yedid. So there's a medrash that says the following. Listen to this. Yova Yedid, along came a beloved, Ben Yedid, son of a beloved, Vayivna Yedid, and he created a beloved place, Le Yedid, for a beloved. Midrashim is sometimes a bit strange in language, okay? And Bechelka Shel Yedid, in the area belonging to a Yedid, a beloved, V'yizkapra Boil Yedidim, and this place was able to create atonement for beloved people. So who are all these beloved people? Will I do that again? Are you okay? Do it again. So do it again. Yova Yedid, along came a beloved person. Ben Yedid, who was the son of a beloved person. V'yivna Yedid, and he created a beloved place. Le Yedid, for a beloved person. Bechelka Shoydid, in an area belonging to a beloved person. Li'eskaper al bo Yedidim, and it was there in order to create atonement for those who were beloved. Better the second time? Yeah, okay. Well, I'm going to, it tells you what it means anyway. Who is the Ben Yedid Ze Avraham? The Ksibo Liyedid basic, because the Apostle calls Avram the beloved of my house. So who is this Ben Yedid? Right, the son of God that they're talking about here, that's Avram Avinu. V'yivna Yedid Ze Beis HaMikdash. And he created a beloved place. Sorry, I missed out a line, I think. Sorry, totally wrong. I jumped a line. I'll do that again. Yov Yedid, who is the beloved person? Ze Shlomo HaMelech. This is Shlomo HaMelech who came along, and it says, V'yishlach bayis nosen hanobi v'yikra shmo Yedid. Fine. So he is referred to as a beloved person. Ben Yedid, Ze Avram. That's the line I jumped to. And he was the son of a beloved person, Avram. Son of Avram. As we are all sons and daughters of Avram and Sarah. T'ksiv ma'ali Yedid bebesi. Fine. V'yivna Yedid, and what beautiful beloved place did he build? The Beis HaMikdash. Shlomo built the Beis HaMikdash. Beis HaMikdash, T'ksiv ma Yedidas mishkanasecha. It's also called a beloved place. Le Yedid, for a beloved Hashem. He built the Beis HaMikdash for Hashem. T'ksiv ashrei no le Yedid. Bechelko shel Yedid, and for in the area of a Yedid, that was Binyamin. Binyamin is also referred to as a Yedid. Okay. To which Rav Shlomo Wolbe goes on to say, you see very clearly here that the absolute fabric of Klal Yisrael is knitted together by the fact that we are beloved and should be beloved of each other. Fine. The king called Taklas called Haharbas Kriva Havas Bein Abura Bria, and that is in order to create a connection between us and each other, because we all come together 3 times a year. We have to go to the same place, standing shoulder to shoulder, to come close to God. That's the idea. Because if that is the purpose of the whole world, then, and particularly of the Jewish people, that we're supposed to have love for each other, closeness to each other, yedidus, yeshlis pal, it's a pella. Can you not only be astonished on Metzias harichuk v'hachzorias beinenu, the split in Jewish society, the split that separates us, the split away from that idea that is our identity and that is who we are. That instead of seeing each other as Yidden, somebody, an old friend from Manchester, took me for a meal last night, and I was telling him that I write for Hamadiyah, which is obviously extremely frum. I also write for the Jewish press, which is more, I would think, modern Orthodox. Actually more to the right of modern Orthodox these days. As far as I'm concerned, it's all Klal Yisrael. And that's the way we're meant to be, and yet we don't see it like that. And Rabbi Shlomo Wolbe says, if the whole nature, as that Medrash attests to, connected, interconnectivity, love for each other, and that's not the way it is, how could that not be? So he says an astonishing thing. There is somebody called the Ibn Ezra, and he writes, there's a word in Hebrew, the word in Hebrew for cruelty is, does anybody know? Achzar. And the Ibn Ezra says, what does achzar mean? It means akezar. I will see you as though you are zar. You're different and foreign to me. When you look at your children, one of the reasons you love them is because they look like you, and we all love ourselves, do we not? I certainly do. It's well justified in my case. But we all love, and we see ourselves in our kids. That itself, leaving everything else aside, inspires an affection and a love you feel towards somebody. But you cannot be cruel to somebody unless you see somebody akezar. I'll see you as not being like me. So let me tell you an astonishingly interesting story. I used to go to Liverpool University when I was living in England, when I was the campus rabbi for all the universities of the northwest of England. I used to go on a Wednesday night. Loved the Shiurim there. There was a very small bookshelf, and people had given various books. And I picked up a book by a famous English psychologist whose name I've forgotten for the moment. But I opened it, and it was about man's inhumanity to man. I can't remember. It was a very snappy title. And he talks there about how, after the Second World War, the Germans, of course, collapsed, and the Americans captured many Nazis. One of them was Franz Paul Stangl. I'm assuming that, and hope you've never heard of Franz Paul Stangl. But you will certainly have heard about his employment. He was the commandant of Treblinka. So he was interrogated after the war, and they asked him the following question. So in the book, the non-Jewish psychologist is explaining what happened to the Jews in Treblinka, because, of course, the world seems to have forgotten all about that, or maybe hasn't and couldn't care less. I incline towards the second interpretation. But anyway, so he was asked the following question. You see, Treblinka was different to Auschwitz. Auschwitz, of course, was a death camp, but it was also stuff happened there. There was manufacturing in Auschwitz. Outside Auschwitz, there was a salt mine. So Jews were taken to work in the salt mines. There was an armaments factory in Auschwitz. So some Jews worked in the armaments factory. When the Allies, there's only one order that Churchill gave the Royal Air Force, the British Air Force, during the Second World War, or gave to the army, which was totally ignored, and that was the order to bomb Auschwitz, to stop the trains being able to get to their final destination and the gas chambers. They ignored that, and then when they found out there was armaments factories in Auschwitz, with precision they bombed the armaments factories, leaving the railway tracks intact and leaving the gas chambers and the crematoria intact. Anyway, France, but I see, of course it was a death camp, but there was stuff that happened there that was part of the German warfare. Treblinka, there was nothing. Treblinka, it was just, and he explains, the Jews were made to do back-breaking work. When they needed to go to the latrines, and that was just a pit, then usually the permission was denied, meaning that they were very often, he writes, covered in their own excrement and urine. They were starved, of course, so they looked like human skeletons. And the question that they asked them was, why was all that imposed on the Jews who were going to be killed anywhere? Treblinka was just a death camp. They were just there to kill them. And he gave an answer which is absolutely astonishing. Listen to this. In order to condition those who had to carry out the policies, to make it possible for them to do what they had to do. To condition those, that's the Nazis, that's the SS, to condition those who had to carry out the policies, to make it possible for them to do what they had to do. Even a Nazi had to see a Jew as not being like him or her, not being a human being, being an Untermensch, being somebody who was not human. Then, if you are Khazar, if I see you as not being me, then I can be cruel to you, then I can kill you. But if I see me when I look at you, I see a face just like mine looking back at me, I can't possibly do that. And here we have a situation with Claudius Thrall, and I'm sure you know the history of this, when the Roman army invaded the north, that led up to the destruction of the Second Temple, 2 years to subdue the north of Israel. When they arrived at the walls of Jerusalem, their spies, Jewish spies, Roman Jewish spies, said to the general, don't attack. The Jews are busy killing each other. It was a civil war raging. So don't get nice Italian boys slaughtered here. Just wait till they finish doing the job, and then we'll walk in. It'll be a piece of cake. In order to kill another Jew, you've got to see him as not being like you. And Shlomo says, how on earth could that have happened? How could such a thing be possible? Yeah. How are we doing for time? So, there is a famous Ramban. And the Ramban you'll find in Bereshis, we all know what this is. It's when Yaakov Avinu goes to sleep on Har HaBayis, and he sees a ladder going up to heaven, and there are angels, oilim v'yordin bo. Now that's critical. Every word, of course, counts in the Torah. But it says they were going up and coming down. It doesn't say they were going down and going up. Most escalators are an up and a down. But here it says they were going up and then they were coming down. How many angels, says the Ramban, says the Medrash Rabbah, were on that ladder? 4. And these were the angels. There's this concept in the Talmud, certainly in the Kabbalistic writings, of each nation has a sar, an angel, and the sar, the angel, embodies the philosophy and the outlook, the Weltschaft is the German word, of the nation that it represents. Okay, so there's effectively a United Nations in heaven, with all sorts of angels representing all of the nations of the world. So you can imagine the German angel is exactly on time, never late, and then the Irish angel is always drunk, and you get the idea of it. The philosophy, the nature of the people they represent, is embodied or personified, if personified is the right word, in the angel. And the idea is that no nation falls until its angel falls first, till its philosophy, its ideal falls first. So the first angel goes up, and the first exile we were in was the exile we were put into after the destruction of the first temple, the Babylonian. And this angel goes up 70 rungs in the ladder. So 70 steps in the ladder, because it was 70 years that we were going to be in exile. And then it comes down, Olim, the Yordim. That was the amount of time that Babylon, where it stood for, its philosophy, all empires rise and fall. Just look at human history. But when they stop believing in themselves, when their Weltschaft, when their philosophy it just becomes, they don't believe in that stuff anymore, then the angel falls and they go down. So it goes up 70 rungs of the ladder, and then it comes down. And the next, I'm going to start forgetting this. I think the next one was the Median, which became the Babylonian. It goes up 120 rungs of the ladder and then comes down. And then another, I can't remember, 80 or whatever. And then he sees famously the angel of Asaph, who goes up and up and up and never comes down. And when Yaakov sees this, of course, the last one is Rome. Rome is, of course, Europe. Europe becomes the whole of the world. Then basically, when he sees it come down, he gets very upset, and he says, will he never fall? And Hashem says the following thing, through the Novi, and then eventually the Ramban quotes it, Afilu sagbia kenesher. Even if he flies like, or soars like an eagle, Ubein hakachovim, and between the stars, Son Kinech makes his home. Afilo mishom nurudkan ne'um Hashem. Even from there, I will cast him down, says Hashem. That's a very interesting promise. Even if he soars like an eagle, and between the stars he makes his home. At which point in human history have men and women made their home amongst the stars?
Space.
The space shuttle. There is people who, if you look up, you see it goes. I think it's only every 10 minutes it comes flying around, and you can see it just astonishing speed. It goes around. You just see this star going a bit like a shooting star, but that's the space shuttle, looking round and round, and it's apparently manned, personed, all the time. There's always people there. There is one time in human history when we've made our home amongst the stars, as it were, when this prediction fits perfectly into the reality of our times. And that is our times now. Effectively, you could say, if the Mashiach, and of course the Mashiach could come at any time, I don't know how we would interpret that Novi then, but now in our times it's very easy. There is a time when the Mashiach will come, and the time when Asaph in his exile will fall down, and that is in our time. Clearly, and so in our time. More than that, why is it that it takes so long, or is taking so long to happen? 120 years, 180 years, the previous ones, okay, a long time, generations, but in the span of human history, quite small. And this is 2000 and counting. So Rabbi Dessler talks about, there's somebody called Sigmund Freud. In fact, most of the destructive ideas that came about in the 20th century sadly came from us. And there was that other guy called Marx, although he was in the 19th century. But you get the idea. So basically, Freud divided the psyche into basically two areas. One is ego, and one is id. Now, we all know exactly what ego is, right? And we see it too often, as we know. I, of course, have no problem with it whatsoever. Humility was the first Mida I perfected. But of course, ego, everybody knows what ego is. What is id? Anybody want to describe id? Yeah.
It's temptation, and it's about the bad inclination.
Yeah, you're making this all very Fromm. Yes, you're right. So Freud wasn't Fromm, although he came from a Fromm family, and his family became Fromm after he died. But that's a different story. Id is anything which you get physical pleasure from. Food. Think of all the things that give a person physical pleasure. But of course, there's an interesting thing about physical pleasure. When I was a little boy, I remember an uncle gave me a fortune on my birthday, which is coming up. I'm just hinting here. He gave me £5, which could buy, I think, something like 9 or 10 bars of chocolate. Oh, indeed. So I bought 9 or 10 bars of chocolate. I had a particular way of eating chocolate. I took off the paper wrapping, and then there's the tin or aluminum, whatever it is, So I used to peel this back like a banana, and I used to hold this in front of the electric fire and lick it like like a popsicle. And I ate the first one, and it was absolutely good. That is another art form, isn't it? You just got to get it quite right. Anyway, and that was yummy and great, and then of course I ate the next one, and that was also very good. And being young and stupid, just being a kid, I ate all 9. Yeah. And then... yes, and I was sick, right? And I threw it all up, etc. And I think I was not able to look a bar of chocolate in the face for a very long time, maybe a week. But the thing about everything that gives you physical pleasure, the general rule is, as we all know, too much of it, and you're done with it. Now, the first base of Meekness was destroyed because of Avodah Zarah and murder and Gilead Rias. But the Gemara says that the murder and the Avodah Zarah was only there in order to allow the Gilead Rias to take place. You see somebody's wife who's prettier than your wife and you want her. Well, her husband might object, so kill him. Or you feel a little bit guilty about this because your moral code says adultery is out. See the 10 Commandments for further details. Change it, reform it, or bring in a new Avodah Zarah, no problem whatsoever. But therefore, it was all about znus and a taiva for znus. But then they go, and here's the rule: you're always exiled, says Rabbi Dessler, into a nation which manifests your problem as its chief characteristic. Does that make sense? It's Mida Keneged Mida. What you do wrong, you will be exposed to that. So therefore, you will be in a corrupt, immorally corrupt Klal Yisrael. And sometimes we are so collectively stricken with the disease, whatever the disease is, that it takes something really big to change our minds. And it has to sometimes actually be expulsion. Sometimes it takes something big. I had to take Chernobyl blowing up before we took the dangers of the nuclear industry seriously. Sometimes it's a big shock before we're going to change. The problem is a morally corrupt society. Now you go into Babylon. You're exiled to Babylon. If you look it up in a dictionary, you'll find that in English, Babylon is a synonym for a sexually corrupt society. A Babylon. Then you're surrounded by it. You can do tons of it. It's the norm. But if it's id, then you get sick of it. You stop doing it. If you stop doing it, the reason for being in exile goes away and you can go back. And that applies to all of them. But what if the reason that you're in exile is because of ego? Ego is not like it. It's got a cut-off point. But ego has got no cut-off point. Empires expand until they explode. But they want to keep expanding. The more you've got, the more you want. That's Esav. And if we are engaged in Sinas Chinam, it's all about ego. And that takes us right back to what we're saying. If you live in a generation which hasn't seen the temple rebuilt, you're doing the exact same thing. We haven't worked on the ego. It's all about I, so instead of being us. It's achkazor. I don't see you as me. Because I see myself as I. I'm a singular. Instead of we are plural. So if all this makes sense to you, you know, you can go to all sorts of brilliant Shiurim, says Chaim Shmulevitz, and Friedlander, and you can hear the most brilliant thing, inspirational ideas, which hopefully none of mine, but that I've shared with you, and it really make an impact. But if you don't act on it straight away, says Chaim Friedlander, the inspiration will soon get lost, and it will. So, I want to offer you a practical exercise. Okay, if we are serious about ending this godless, if we really do want to see a new shining gold building where at the moment there's a mosque, here's something to test yourself. If it is the case that we have all failed the Yedid test of Reb Shlomo Volba, if we've sort of like forgotten that we're all part of the same family and we're quite happy to hear Lashon Hara about each other, if we have, and after all we're Jewish, a member of our family whom we used to be friendly with and we're no longer friendly with, have you read about that in books? I mean, can you imagine such a thing? Maybe it was a cousin, maybe it was a brother or a sister. I know Rob in Manchester tells me every single month he's at the bedside of some old person in a coma, and the brother or sister will take them aside, they're very old, and said, I haven't spoken to my brother and sister for over 40 years. And now it's too late. He said, you know what's really sad? They can no longer remember why they fell out. Isn't that sad? Anyway, so basically, if we're serious about that, I want you to think about, and if it doesn't apply to you, and I hope it doesn't, but you'll be able to use this with somebody it does apply to. Somebody who's no longer spoken to the brother or the sister. God forbid, a father or mother or a child for a very long time. I'm going to tell you something you can try and do. I can't guarantee it's going to work, but I will give you a guarantee it's got a 90% certainty of working. I think I mentioned this once to you before, I can't remember. But it goes like this. You simply phone this person up after you go home after this share, whom you haven't spoken to. Now, incidentally, you haven't spoken to them because there must be a reason for it. And it may be that ultimately they were the cause of it. But you're going to pretend it's not that. You're going to phone and say, hello, it's me. I know you want to hang up, but I just want to tell you one thing. I've been thinking about why we no longer speak to each other, why we fell out, and I've been thinking about it hard, and I've come to the conclusion it was 100% my fault. Now, I know it wasn't, because it's very rarely 100% anybody's fault, but you're going to say that. And then you're going to add, and you're going to do it exactly as I tell you, it's going to work. And then you're going to add, and I'd like to come personally and apologise. My 90% promise is that by the time you get there the next day, or whatever, the person who greets you at the door is going to say, it wasn't just your fault. It's my fault too. And you'll find that you've now recovered a relationship with a brother or a sister, even a child, a parent, a cousin, or an old friend. I said this first in a share in Manchester called Steencourt's Show. And it was Yom Kippur, and I offered a challenge. I think I did tell you this story. And 2 days later, a guy phoned me up in a broad Manchester accent. He said, Rabbi Rubenstein. And I said, yes. Rabbi Rubenstein, I was in Shul in Yom Kippur, and I heard you talking about making up with your brother. I said, yeah. He said, well, I hadn't spoken to my brother for 15 years. I said, oh, yeah. So I listened to what you said, and I phoned him up. I said, don't hang up the phone. It's me. I've been thinking about what happened. I want to tell you, I've come to the conclusion it was entirely my fault. He said, you're dead right, and he slammed down the phone. However, I have to tell you, and almost every single time I've offered this challenge, I remember most recently I was in Washington DC, and I asked people, get in touch, let me know if you do this. How did it work out? I got 14 phone calls that week. Every single one. I'm now talking to my brother whom I haven't spoken for 20 years, 15 years, etc., etc. If everything we've said is true, and we want to do our bit, it's the frum bit of Klal Yisrael, of course, who's ultimately guilty. But you can't change the frum bit of Klal Yisrael. Hey, 3 million, 4 million Jews. I've decided you've all got to change your behavior. That's not going to work. You can change your own behavior. And who knows, when the scales are perfectly balanced, what impact that one phone call could make. So let me know next week. I'm interested to know. At least you're letting Hashem know, we're taking it seriously, because we really want to see that golden temple rebuilt in Jerusalem.
Thank you. Excuse